Chapter 1. Redder Than Red. The Chinese Communist Party was founded in 1921. Thousands joined in the early 20s as the CCP fought alongside the nationalist Kuomintang against China's warlords. When the Kuomintang turned against the communists in 1927, the CCP's original leaders were killed. This leadership vacuum was filled by an ambitious land reform advocate named Mao Zedong. Mao could never compete with the party's urbane founders, but their elimination gave him an opening. In 1933, the Kuomintang sieged Mao's forces, forcing them to retreat in the Long March. Mao's guerrillas fought their way north to arrive in Yan'an in 1935. Mao freed several local leaders, including Xi Jinping's father, Xi Jinping, who had been sentenced to death by a rival faction. As Xi Jinping later recalled, "Without Mao, my father would have been no more. Without Mao, there would be no Xi Jinping today." In Yan'an, Mao neutralized his remaining rivals and molded the party in his own image. The invasion of the Japanese forced an alliance between the CCP and the Kuomintang, but by the end of World War II, the Chinese Civil War had already resumed. The CCP's path to victory remains shrouded in mystery. At the end of World War II, the CCP controlled one town, Yan'an, and its members accounted for less than 0.01% of China's population. But through their mastery of propaganda, they mobilized millions to fight for them, masking their communist movement as the true incarnation of the nation's will. 4 years later, China was theirs. Even more remarkably, the CCP was horribly unpopular wherever they ruled. They introduced communist reforms during the Chinese Civil War, and as great sinologist Laszlo Ladany recalled, all suspected enemies were treated brutally. One could walk about in the North Chinese plains and see hands sticking out from the ground, the hands of people buried alive. Luckily for the communists, government propaganda was so poorly organized that people living in regions not occupied by the communists knew nothing of these atrocities. Once the country was theirs, the CCP extended these practices to all of China. By 1952, 80% of all Chinese had been forced to take part in mass accusation meetings, or public executions. During these proceedings, the crowd was forced to roar their approval in unison, ensuring collective participation in the murder of innocents. This was repeated every 2 to 3 years. Millions of Chinese fought against the Western coalition in the Korean War, which proved extremely costly. In 1957, Mao invited open debate about his policies during his 100 Flowers campaign, but was shocked by the criticism and purged thousands of intellectuals as a result. Instead of implementing these reforms, Mao announced his new economic plan, better known as the Great Leap Forward. During this period, nearly all of China's villagers were transported to communes with strict production quotas. The Great Leap Forward involved massive investment, but produced little to show for it. resulting in the largest man-made famine in human history, though at the time, experts around the world agreed no famine was occurring. The total number of deaths remains unknown, but official estimates range from 15 to 50 million. For this, Mao was briefly sidelined. But fearing his decline, Mao began a campaign to return to power, and in 1966 officially launched the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution. It was during this period that Xi Jinping would experience his coming of age. Xi Jinping was born in Beijing in 1953. His father, Xi Jinping, was notable among party leaders for his relative moderation. When the Tibetans fought back against the CCP, he tried to push for a peaceful solution. The Dalai Lama later gifted him a watch that he kept for the rest of his life. At home, however, it was another story. Xi Jinping was a brutal disciplinarian who would scream, lash out at his wife, and beat Xi Jinping and his siblings. In public, the model statesman; in private, the tyrant. In 1962, Xi Jinping was stripped of his titles for defending the honor of a purged comrade. In 1966, Mao launched his Cultural Revolution, setting radical youths, called Red Guards, against the party hierarchy. Red Guards attacked anyone they perceived as Mao's enemies and destroyed China's cultural relics en masse. Books were burned, intellectuals were persecuted, and countless officials were purged. Xi Jinping and his confidants rarely speak of his experience in the early Cultural Revolution. Xi's parents were tortured, and his father was exiled to central China. A bookish boy, Xi's boarding school was shut, and he was sent to school number 25, where he and his friends were bullied and beaten relentlessly as children of a black gang. Xi's home was ransacked, and his elder sister was coerced into suicide. In one incident, Xi was paraded onto a stage wearing a heavy metal dunce cap. His mother was forced to attend and shout, "Shame on Xi Jinping," along with the crowd. But Xi never lost faith in the party, later recalling how he recited the thoughts of Chairman Mao every day, late into the night. Xi's father was imprisoned in 1968, and Xi was sentenced to juvenile detention. But he avoided this fate when Mao launched the Down to the Countryside movement, sending over 16 million youth to work on farms and learn about rural life. Age 15, Xi was sent to live in a cave house in Yan'an. As he later recalled, "It was January 1969. Everyone was crying. There wasn't anyone on the train who didn't cry. But I was the only one laughing. The only one laughing." Xi couldn't stand farm work and ran away to Beijing, but he was caught and sentenced to a forced labor camp for re-education. Xi later returned to Yan'an and this time threw himself into his work, impressing the locals. He joined the Communist Youth League in 1971 after being rejected 7 times, and officially joined the CCP in 1974 after being rejected 9 times. In the words of a friend, after the Cultural Revolution, most youth made up for lost time by having fun. But Xi chose to survive by becoming redder than red. Xi earned a spot at Tsinghua University, China's most prestigious school. His father regained his freedom and was fully rehabilitated after Mao's death. Xi began a journey through China, working his way up the ranks of the party. The clever young Xi was the model party man. He effortlessly mastered debts and derivatives and became proficient in the trendy buzzwords of the business elite. With soldiers, he spoke in military idiom, and among party members, shifted easily to the coded jargon of Marxism. To the common people, he exemplified the ideals of patriotic service and family life, while he charmed wide-eyed foreigners with relatable tales of trying to find time for his exercise routine. Unlike other members his age, he didn't drink much or womanize, dressing plainly and riding a bicycle, even when his rank permitted him an official car. In a party notorious for corruption, Xi had a reputation for thinking ahead and staying clean. Of these traits, coupled with his lineage, the party elite took notice. In 2006, when Shanghai's party chief was fired, Xi was picked to replace him. Just 7 months into his appointment, Xi leapt directly into the Politburo Standing Committee, China's highest governing body. 6 months later, Xi was named vice president, unexpectedly becoming successor to the general secretary. Since 1978, most Chinese had experienced a period of moderation, economic success, and global interconnection. The most dystopian excesses of Mao's Cultural Revolution had been reversed. Young activists and bloggers could often flout censorship rules, knowing punishments would be modest. But that progress always conflicted with the CCP's darker pathologies and insecurities. The party lived in chronic fear of China's dissidents and minority communities, knowing any independent organization could pose a threat to its rule. Privately, CCP leaders worried that their governing institutions wouldn't be strong enough to prevent the rise of another absolute leader like Mao. In November 2012, Xi Jinping was elected General Secretary of the CCP. In light of his steady career, his struggles in the Cultural Revolution, and his father's reputation for integrity, Xi was widely expected to be a moderate reformer who would continue leading his country toward openness and global cooperation. Xi Jinping had other plans.